Hi. 5 years ago, during the height of the COVID pandemic, I was sitting in my parents' basement playing a video game. I know. So embarrassing. But it was one that I, as well as a legion of gamers, had been waiting for years for. The Last of Us Part 2. We were promised by Neil Druckmann and the Naughty Dog team that this game would be about hate. That it would be about Ellie and her revenge quest. And it was. The game starts, and sorry about spoilers here, but the game starts with the death of Joel at the hands of Abby. So this revenge quest centers around Ellie tracking her down and getting that revenge. And this is what gamers wanted to do. This is what we were promised, right? The whole lead up to this game being released, we were told this is what it's about. Now, this culminates in the final confrontation between Ellie and Abby. Now, this final confrontation, as a player, I was excited to see. You had played through 3 days in Seattle as Ellie, tracking down all the people who were part of the mission to go and kill Joel, but ultimately looking for Abby, the one who was responsible for his death. The whole time, the player, me, is waiting for this confrontation to happen. I want to see what is going to happen at the end. I want to see how this story concludes. And it was there, in the theater, that I realized this game is only halfway over. You see, they promised that it was about revenge and it was about hate. What they didn't tell us was that it was also about redemption. But not Ellie's redemption. Now, if you're looking for an Abby hate video, you won't find it here. Now, before you go, I think you should stick around. I think you should watch this. Because the ultimate goal of this video is to try to understand and explain why I think there was such a negative reaction to this game. In my estimation, this game can be characterized by two distinct things. One is dissonance. I think it's a very dissonant experience to play The Last of Us 2. I think it's more than just playing as Abby, though that is extremely dissonant. It's also dissonant because the game is asking you to do a lot of things that kind of don't work all the time. And so throughout the video, I'm going to explain and talk about and explore this dissonance. But the other thing I want to talk about is the quote-unquote culture war. If you were engaging in any way with social media and YouTube reactions to this game in the days leading up to and after its release, you will know that a large part of the criticisms leveled at it and the character of Abby was essentially strong lady bad. To this day, I'm certain that plenty of people will say something similar to this video. I can remember my first thought when I realized I had to play as Abby was something like horror at the idea that I had to play as Joel's killer. My second thought, though, was something like, oh, this is going to be a nightmare online. Every reactionary conservative YouTuber fired up the old camera and got on stream and started saying things like, they make you kill Joel and they make you play as that freak Abby who's trans and she's a man, and Neil Cuckman was probably fantasizing about her beating him up. Gigantor, I can't do the accent, Gigantor is what a strong woman looks like according to feminism. If you know who I'm referencing there, good for you. Interestingly, now that they've made Abby not buff on the HBO series, and in fact kind of small, I'm seeing some really different takes. I also think this has to do with like algorithmic social media. Like when this game first came out, it wasn't as prominent, so I was seeing a lot of the right wing stuff, and now because TikTok is just what you like to see, and even to some extent Twitter and Instagram, I'm seeing stuff about Abby being too small. I think that's an interesting critique. I think it's because the showrunners were probably a little bit scared to make her so muscular because they saw the backlash 5 years ago. I think they chickened out, but whatever. This time, though, the backlash that I've seen from the Gamergate adjacent boys who were complaining about Abby being too muscular in the last game, and don't you worry, we will talk more about Gamergate later on, they're now complaining about Bella Ramsey not being hot enough to be Ellie. I wonder if there's some correlation there between the way men tend to perceive women in media and how they were thinking about Abby in the game and Bella Ramsey in the show. And I shouldn't even say that because it's just women's bodies, right? Because Bella Ramsey is non-binary, so this is going to be a long one. So here's what I was saying. I think the creators of the game wanted the players to feel the dissonance of the game. Dissonance is important. There is no way they thought that gamers would be like jumping with joy about playing as Abby, the killer of the most important character in the Last of Us universe, right? Even the backlash online to the show, which again, I'm only seeing these sort of like algorithmically fed tweets and TikToks, are about how people hate Abby. And of course they do, because you're supposed to, right? Like, that's the point. You're supposed to hate Abby. The problem is twofold. One, I think that some of the dissonance it doesn't work. It's like not intended. Like, there are things about Ellie's journey that don't make sense that we'll talk about in a minute. But I also think a lot of the dissonance around Abby in the game was actually fed by the culture war stuff. So, first, let's define dissonance.
She blew up trucks and killed some soldiers. Not that hard to explain.
Have you read her writings?
Skimmed some.
You'd benefit from it.
Sure.
Merriam-Webster defines dissonance as a lack of agreement, especially inconsistency between the beliefs one holds or between one's actions and their beliefs. Another way to think about dissonance, though, is in musical terms. Dissonance in music is when the notes of a piece of music clash with one another, creating a lack of harmony in that particular section in the music. The thing about dissonance in music is that it is often used to build tension before being resolved, giving the listener a sense of resolution at the fact that the tension is now over. But what if the listener doesn't get a resolution? What if that tension persists? Cognitive dissonance, on the other hand, is more specifically about the mind. According to Wikipedia, cognitive dissonance is described as the mental disturbance people feel when they realize their cognitions and actions are inconsistent or contradictory. Cognitive dissonance is distinct from just plain dissonance in that it feels really bad to whoever is experiencing it, and it is in your brain. Like clashing notes in music, cognitive dissonance can cause anguish, except there isn't a conductor there to smooth out the notes. Instead, you have to be the conductor. Cognitive dissonance is typically experienced as psychological stress when people participate in an action that goes against one or more of their beliefs, ideas, or values. Wikipedia says, when an action or idea is psychologically inconsistent with the other, people do all in their power to change either so that they become consistent. Now, it's much easier to change an action or a little idea in your head than it is to change a belief that is deep, deep within your soul. But how does that apply to video games? Can that happen when I sit down to play my favorite game? The answer is yeah, duh. But because humans love to make up new shit, it actually has a special term. In 2007, Clint Hawking, writing on his Click Nothing blog, authored a post called Ludonarrative Dissonance in BioShock, the problem of what the game is about. In that post, he states, BioShock seems to suffer from a powerful dissonance between what it is about as a game and what it is about as a story. Let's break this down. The word ludonarrative simply means game, story. Ludo or ludens means game, and narrative means story. And then dissonance, we already know, so put them together and you have what happens in The Last of Us 2. A game narrative that is at odds with itself. One part game, one part story. The two, though trying, never really able to truly fit together neatly, always pulling each other in two different directions. I do think that the game Druckmann, Naughty Dog, whoever you want to say, is aware of this dissonance. I think that's a huge part of what Druckmann and the creative team wanted to do with the story. They wanted to make us feel uncomfortable and upset, like we're being pulled in two directions at once, like we're working against our own interests and desires. They knew that making us play as Abby would be extremely uncomfortable and wanted players to try to come to terms with that discomfort. In Grounded 2, which is the documentary about the making of The Last of Us 2, Hallie Gross, the co-writer of this game with Neil Druckmann, says, Ellie is this very relatable character. I thought she was a perfect vehicle to challenge this notion that violence doesn't have a cost, because it does have a cost in reality. It's going to ruin this girl. A little later on, she says, people love Joel and Ellie, and we're about to kill one and make the other one a villain. In theory, I think this is a great idea for a video game story, because video games are the most immersive form of storytelling we have right now. This means we feel this destruction of Ellie in a way that we can't in a TV show or movie. In a video game, you become the character you're playing, so destroying Ellie feels like destroying yourself in a way. This is sometimes called projective identity. Go watch my Deathloop video to learn more about that. The problem here is that I don't think Gross and Druckmann knew just how bad the reaction from players would be. I also don't think they realized how dissonant the game actually is. Yes, it is uncomfortable to play as Abby, and that is a dissonance the game wants us to feel. But what about the dissonance of killing tens, if not hundreds, of people just to come to the end, feel bad for Abby, and let her live? That invokes cognitive dissonance too. Narratively, I understand who Abby is and why she killed Joel, and I can sympathize with her as a player. But Ellie, who just killed tens, if not hundreds, of people to get to her nemesis, I don't think she can empathize. And there it is again, that feeling of being pulled in two different directions. It actually breaks the immersion in a way. I, the player, become very aware of the fact that I am not Ellie, but that shouldn't really happen in a medium as immersive as games. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here, because this dissonance, for better or worse, starts with him. When I started playing The Last of Us 2 for the second time, I knew it was coming. Yet in my notes, I wrote, even knowing what's coming, I'm sort of dreading the death of Joel. Last night, I didn't want to play at all because I knew that it was coming and it was going to be heavy and make me upset. When I sat down to play this section of the game, I felt a little sick. Yes, I am a huge nerd, but more than that, the fact that this section of the game took preparation to get through goes to show how important Joel is as a character in gaming. Start asking gamers who their favorite game character is, and it won't take long before you stumble upon someone telling you why Joel is the ultimate video game character. A quick Google search will reveal a shit ton of essays defending Joel's decision to save Ellie while slaughtering the Fireflies in the first game. Personally, I understand this take. I know that if it were me and my wife or sister or future child were the one laying on that operating table, I'm shooting Marlene in the face. But this is where the dissonance begins. For many players, knowing that Joel did a bad thing that actually kind of makes him a bad person, creates a sense of dissonance. In that clashing music, though, we also dig in. Joel is someone I admire. Joel is a good man at heart who wanted to save someone he loved. Joel did something I would do too. Joel, therefore, cannot be a bad guy. Because if Joel is a bad guy, aren't I one too? Those two things cannot be true at the same time. Logically, we can understand that what Joel did is wrong, but emotionally, we don't care. The vast majority of players agree that they would do what Joel did too. Punishing Joel for taking that action is akin to punishing the player. Those opposing points create cognitive dissonance, but not really ludonarrative dissonance. In all my time talking to other people about this game, I've never met someone who wouldn't have done what Joel did. There are varying degrees of thinking he was wrong and that he shouldn't have done it, but not that they wouldn't have done the same given the situation. It's dissonance all the same because it is this sin for which Joel must pay the price. There isn't dissonance within the first game itself, though. The game, Ludo, is about transporting this young girl across the country and killing the people and zombies that get in our way, And the story, narrative, becomes about Joel learning to love and becoming a father figure to Ellie, which spurs him to do a horrible thing to save her. We can understand it's wrong, but we don't care. Even with the knowledge that Joel committed a horrible act, like killing the Fireflies and destroying any chance at a cure, Joel's death is the inciting incident for the online reaction to The Last of Us 2. To this day, you will see people online saying that they never played the game because they killed Joel, or that Naughty Dog and Druckmann decided to kill Joel because of the feminist agenda or some such nonsense. But the fairest criticism I've seen people give on the internet, I think, is the way in which Joel, with Tommy, ends up in a position to be killed by Abby in the first place. As much as I do agree, narratively, with killing Joel, I do think the way it happens is rather contrived. Yes, I agree, Joel and Tommy seemed far too nonchalant walking into a situation where they were vastly outnumbered by a heavily armed and organized group of strangers. But while this is often the reason given by people who say killing Joel was bad and stupid and ruined The Last of Us, I think I have a better and more convoluted one, so buckle in. There is cognitive dissonance at play during Joel's death. On the surface, his lack of concern when walking into the lion's den with Abby and her friends stands out.
Mel, by the way.
Tommy, this is my brother.
Joe. Felt like you heard of us or something.
But personally, I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for the sake of the story. This setup to his death could have been better, but I've also seen far worse in other stories. I think on a deeper level, many players let Joel occupy two roles in their mind. He is the stand-in for the player in the first game, giving the player the classic male power fantasy that is baked into many, if not most, AAA titles, and really the gaming industry at large. And because of projective identity, again, go watch my Deathloop video, we become Joel and Joel becomes the player. We feel so strongly about Joel because we are Joel in this world. But Joel is another thing to a lot of players, a father figure. In this way, players occupy the role of Joel and Ellie in the world of The Last of Us. Many of the boys who played The Last of Us Part 1 longed to be Joel, but were actually Ellie, and in that way looked up to Joel. His death hurts two parts of the brain, the part that thinks Abby is killing you, and the part that thinks Abby is killing your father figure. This augments the pain felt. Perhaps not exactly cognitive dissonance, but a similar pulling in two directions. No longer can I play as Joel, fill his steel-toed boots, but at the same time, I can never mend the relationship I've lost with him as Ellie.
I don't think I can ever forgive you for that.
But I would like to try.
This is a type of dissonance, and it runs parallel to the dissonance we feel at the idea that Joel must pay for his crimes. Crimes that the fanbase at large have agreed Joel was righteous in committing. Joel, in the minds of many, committed no wrong, and therefore Abby, although in her own narrative is getting revenge, is actually committing a much worse crime in the minds of the players. This may be a dissonant thought, but if The Last of Us Part 1 was the story of Abby becoming a firefly and then becoming a wolf in Seattle, and the whole time we knew something horrible happened to her dad because of this guy Joel who massacred the fireflies for simply trying to create a cure, we would want Joel dead. But that isn't what happened. To add insult to injury, the culture war rages on. The gender binary is being questioned constantly, and there are people who, despite how much the gender binary hurts them, feel as though the removal of that binary might hurt them even more. The fact that Abby's body is so masculine, is so male-coded, so clearly goes against the binary, and that adds to the dissonance of this moment. Joel doesn't get killed by a man, and he doesn't even get killed by an Ellie-like woman. He is killed by a masculine-coded but non-queer female character. And then we also have to play as her. Before we get to Abby, let's first discuss Ellie.
Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have...
Please stop! Please don't shoot!
Joel, please get up!
The problem with dissonance being one of the main themes of this game is that Ellie's quest from the very beginning is dissonant in ways that are important to the game's story and overall message, while also disrupting the overall narrative of the game. Like Clint Hawking said, there is a difference between what the game is about and what the story is about. After the death of Joel, the player is firmly on Ellie's side. We cannot allow the people who killed Joel to get away with murdering him. We feel Ellie's pain, and we want to destroy that group, regardless of what their reasoning is. However, the game wants the player to question whether or not we are right in trying to destroy this group of people. Meanwhile, we massacre everyone in our way to get to them. In Grounded 2, the Naughty Dog team explained that they wanted the fight sequences to feel more real than in the first game. Hallie Gross says, "Our NPCs are named so that you understand these people have relationships."
Maggie, find another angle!
The NPCs that Ellie fights her way through are far more realistic than the first game. They call out to each other and react to the deaths of their friends. But here's the problem. I feel like I've seen that before.
Joel, get up.
So why is it any different for Ellie to kill tens, if not hundreds of NPCs who have names and relationships with the people around them than it is for Abby to kill one person named Joel? In fact, she actively chooses to save Ellie and Tommy when she should, by the rules that Ellie plays by, have killed them as well. Leave none alive. The best example of this is the scene where Ellie confronts Nora.
Don't scream. Put that shit down.
This scene is designed to make the player question if this mission is actually worth all this pain and suffering. Ellie is extremely conflicted after she tortures and kills Nora. She comes back to the camp battered and bruised, and she is carrying the weight of brutalizing Nora for the information that she needs about Abby. The problem is, as the player, torturing Nora is far from the worst thing I've done in this game. I lit someone on fire, like literally 12 seconds ago.
Fucking trespassers!
Plus, Nora was there when they killed Joel, and she shows no remorse about it.
You still hear his screams?
What?
I hear them every night. Yeah. Yeah, that little bitch got what he deserved.
While my anger isn't exactly directed at her, in the eyes of the player, she is far more guilty than anyone I've murdered while randomly stumbling around Seattle. But in this section, the game wants to call into question our accessory to murdering Nora. Druckmann seems to want us as the players to realize that Ellie is wrong, or if not outright wrong, morally conflicted at the very least. In this scene, the game wants to wiggle its finger at us and tell us how naughty we've been for torturing poor Nora. We should be so ashamed of ourselves. Well, game, where was this hand-wringing when I was shooting people I don't know in the face? Though media literacy is certainly dead, I don't think this is lost on most players, even the ones that hate Abby. I think it's clear that Joel actually was the villain in Abby and her crew's story, and that they hate him the way Ellie, and by extension the player, hates Abby and her crew. So, why is it justified when Ellie goes on a murderous rampage, but not justified when Abby kills one guy? This conflict is at odds with the core gameplay loop, which is stabbing, slicing, shooting, and brutally fighting your way through everyone that stands in between you and your goal. Ludonarrative dissonance pops up because the narrative is telling us that we should feel bad for torturing and killing Nora.
I made her talk. It's okay.
But the gameplay is telling us that we must continue mercilessly mowing down enemy after enemy to get to the next checkpoint, or the next cutscene, or the next plot point. And this inadvertently calls into question the entirety of Ellie's story. If she feels remorse at killing the people she's come all this way to kill, why doesn't she feel remorse for the grunts she slaughters along the way? We're supposed to think these people are real, and that Ellie kills like 100 of them a day in Seattle, but that doesn't kill Abby because she's a real person. Why doesn't Ellie stop and think, damn, I've killed 50 people today, all of which are likely someone's Joel or Ellie or Dina or Jesse or Abby? Do these NPCs, which the developers made a point of giving names and identities and relationships, have the right to hunt Ellie down to the ends of the earth and fight her on the shores of the sea as the waves gently lap on the boats? If you're using Ellie's logic, then yeah, they do. And this is super dissonant to the player and hurts the story. We're supposed to feel for Abby, the one who killed Joel, but not these random people being stabbed in the throat for simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Don't make a fucking sound.
This specific type of dissonance comes to a head in the final confrontation between Ellie and Abby. I'm going to make a big claim here that I don't like, but I think people might agree with. I think, narratively, it makes sense that Ellie shouldn't kill Abby. But I think in terms of the character, Ellie would kill Abby. More dissonance, more pulling in two directions. The game tells me that Ellie, after all she's been through, after all the death and destruction she's left in her wake, she would not spare the person she's tracked down not once, but twice. But the narrative tells me that Abby must live. I wanted to talk about the end of the game at the end of this video, but I think it actually fits better here. I think the only way Ellie wouldn't kill Abby should have nothing to do with Joel, and instead should have to do with Lev.
He's not a part of this. You made him a part of this.
Ellie tracks down Abby and goes through hell again to find her, this time in Santa Barbara. At this point, Abby is beaten almost beyond recognition, starved, sunburnt, and barely alive. Abby's companion, Lev, is hanging on by a thread. Ellie finds them strung up, helps Abby down, and follows her to a boat where they have their final fight. The player, as Ellie, fights Abby and ultimately wins. It is in this moment, as she is drowning Abby, about to resolve the conflict, resolve the dissonance that has been hanging over our heads for the entirety of this game, she suddenly stops and allows Abby to regain her breath and escape with Lev. After everything, Ellie lets Abby live. Throughout the game, Ellie and Abby have been experiencing parallel narratives. On one hand, we see Ellie's quest for revenge being played out through the narrative of the game, and the theme we're meant to learn is clear. Revenge is a losing battle. On the flip side, we see that this is true. Abby has achieved her revenge, and all it's done is drive a wedge into the middle of her group. They seem to all be on bad terms with each other when we get to Abby's portion of the story. On top of that, Abby is still having dreams of that night in the hospital, reliving the trauma of losing her father in the most violent way imaginable, a trauma that was inflicted on her directly by Joel. Ellie has her own version of this trauma, and she often has visions and dreams of Joel as he screams in pain and dies right in front of her. Abby's visions do not subside after she kills Joel. Instead, they only finally disappear once she saves Yara and Lev. It is only then that she dreams of her father alive and well, standing happily in the operating room. This signifies that Abby did not find solace in revenge, and instead only did find it when doing something good for people that needed it. Ellie, on the other hand, has her own version of the vision right before killing Abby. Instead of seeing Joel's mangled body, she remembers the last night the two of them spoke. She remembers him playing the guitar on the porch. She remembers Joel the way she wants to remember him. Narratively, this parallel is clear. Narratively, Ellie shouldn't kill Abby because we as the player have, as the saying goes, walked a mile in Abby's shoes. Narratively, we understand Abby by the end and understand that she deserves a second chance, just like Ellie. The dissonance is still there, though, because Ellie, the character, hasn't seen what we have. I think Ellie, the character, would kill Abby. Abby didn't stop right before she killed Joel. She did it. Ellie would do the same. The consequences and costs be damned. I also think there is something else that makes far more sense in that moment. Bear with me as I pretend to know more than Naughty Dog and Neil Druckmann and write my own fantasy ending, which I usually hate when people do, but just bear with me. Give me a shot here. The only way that Ellie wouldn't kill Abby is because of Lev. In many ways, Lev is a stand-in for Ellie from the first game. He's young and small, he uses a bow, he's scrappy and tough, and he fights for what he thinks is right. He is hesitant and mistrusting of Abby at first, but grows to love her and becomes fiercely loyal to and protective of her by the end of the game. So why does his presence go completely unstated in that last confrontation? In that final moment between Abby and Ellie, as Ellie is about to finally finish off her opponent and get the revenge she has been chasing for months, if not years, it should be Lev that sways her decision. Seeing Lev, the vulnerable young boy who, without Abby, would be long dead or far worse, should be the catalyst for seeing Joel clearly. She can't kill Abby because killing her would doom Lev in the same way that at one point killing Joel would have doomed Ellie. It is Lev that should spark the memories of Joel and all that he did for her. She wouldn't have those memories, she wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for Joel, and one day Lev will say the same thing about Abby. Perhaps this is more of a personal dissonance, but the chords of the final climax clash for me because this connection, so clear and so obvious to me, goes completely unexamined in the most important moment of the narrative. In its place, we have Ellie suddenly feeling like she shouldn't kill Abby because of Joel. The first time I played the game, I thought it was sort of like Joel wouldn't want her to do this, but I don't think that's true either because Joel was pretty vicious and he mellowed out with age, but, he was still a ruthless killer. I don't think Joel would have thought twice about it. The only thing that might have stayed Joel's hand, the only thing that ever did, was a young girl that needed help.
I do okay.
Are you fucking kidding me?
You're welcome, kiddo.
The moment where Ellie holds Abby's head underwater is a dissonant moment. It is dissonant because, on one hand, this is what we've been working toward the entire game. But on the other, we have seen who Abby is, and she is just as complicated and problematic and hateful and deserving of sympathy as Ellie is. It is a dissonant moment because we must either finish the job, kill Abby, or relent and let her live. And the problem is that this dissonance ends up being useless because the player does not get to make the choice. We don't get to make the decision because Neil Druckmann already did. This is another example of how the dissonance I think the game wants us to feel is not used as effectively as it could be. Personally, I would not have killed Abby in my playthrough, but not because I think Ellie wouldn't, but because I don't think Abby deserves that. And because I want Lev to live, and Lev needs Abby. But I've stalled long enough. I think it's finally time to talk about her.
Abby.
No! Abby, don't look!
Dad! Dad! No! No!
You've spent 3 days in Seattle. A trail of carnage follows you. The newest additions to the pile of bodies are Owen, Abby's ex-boyfriend, and Mel, who was pregnant with Owen's baby. Ellie is back at the theater talking with Jesse and Tommy as Dina, who is also pregnant, worsens in condition. They are setting up their journey back to Jackson, and Ellie sullenly agrees that she must live with allowing Abby to get away.
They got what they deserved.
But she gets to live.
Yeah.
There is a chance Abby is dead anyway, so Ellie must just live with that and hope that she is, even if she didn't get the revenge she so desperately wanted. A commotion happens near the front of the theater. Gunshots. Ellie and Jesse run toward the noise, guns drawn, and as they burst through the doors, Jesse is killed immediately by a bullet. Standing in the theater, dripping wet from the storm outside, battered and beaten, bloody and holding a gun, stands Abby. Finally, I think, I'll get my chance to fight her, to kill her, to get Ellie's revenge. My revenge. Our revenge. And then...
We let you both live. And you wasted it!
There is a dual dissonance associated with Abby's section. First, it is Abby herself, her body, her strength, her physical association with Joel, her nemesis. And the other is her section of the game itself, a 10 to 12 hour stretch of gameplay that was not marketed, not made explicit and clear, and purposefully so. Not only that, it fundamentally breaks the narrative of the story. The player is thrust into Abby's half of the game right as the climax we've been waiting for is about to happen. Talk about giving us blue ball. Let's start with the latter. Like I said a few times, I think the game is supposed to be a dissonant experience. Take, for example, that moment I talked about earlier with Nora. We, the player, are the ones who have to click the button in order to torture Nora. In real life, I'm against the idea of torture, and that should carry over into the game, right? This should produce a dissonant response in my head. I don't want to participate in torture because I think it's wrong, and yet the game is forcing me to. The problem is that I've just killed half of Seattle to get to Nora. After what I've helped Ellie do, torturing Nora feels easy. I've stabbed more or less innocent people in the throat for simply being too close to me, so why do I care about Nora here? The truth is, I don't, and the game kind of told me that. What the Abby section wants to do is have you realize that Abby is a human being with flaws and imperfections just like Ellie. While Ellie devolves into near insanity over getting her revenge, Abby does the opposite. Having achieved her revenge and murdering Joel, she realizes that this revenge has done nothing but hurt her and her friends. In fact, her story shows that revenge costs double, because while she gets her revenge and kills Joel, it is that revenge which causes Ellie to begin her murderous rampage through Seattle, which results in the deaths of all of Abby's friends. Abby only starts to feel peace when she saves Lev and Yara. Then, and only then, do her nightmares about her father subside. The problem is that the dissonance is, for many, too great, too overwhelming to cut through. This, to me, is a problem of the narrative itself. Having me play as Ellie, a character I love and want the best for 10 to 12 hours, all the while reinforcing that we must get revenge on Abby, only to then turn around and have me play as Abby in a way that hopes I grow sympathy for her is... just doesn't, it doesn't work. For 10 to 12 hours, I've been tracking down my enemy, and finally, when I'm given the opportunity to finish this story, you have to replay the entire main body of the game as the person I'm meant to kill, I'm meant to hate. This puts Abby's story at such a disadvantage for what Druckmann and his team were hoping to do. They want us to feel sympathy, but instead, now, not only do I feel annoyed at having to play as someone the game's story has told me to hate, but I also feel tricked out of the climax I was waiting the entire game to see. This is a dissonance I think the game's creators intended, but underestimated. We are being pulled in two directions, but this time the tug-of-war rope is almost completely over the line before the other team starts pulling, and for some players, the game of tug-of-war was already over. In a sense, I guess it does keep you playing because many players, myself included, push through that extra 10 hours. And after replaying the same 3 days in Seattle in Abby's shoes, we are back to where we were. We pilot Abby through the storm and to the theater where we know Ellie and the crew are. We climb through the window. We see the conflict begin from the alternative perspective. We see Abby surprise Tommy, gunshots, we see her kill Jesse on instinct, and finally... I remember thinking on my first playthrough, finally, I'll get to see how this ends. Finally, I'll be returned into Ellie's body where I can get my, or Ellie's, hands on Abby. Sure, I think differently about Abby now, but I have to see how this story ends, and so I'm going to do what the game demands of me. Finally, I'm going to get to fight Joel's killer and get my revenge. Only that's not what happens. What the game demands of me is the opposite of what I want. We do not get teleported back into the body of Ellie. We remain in Abby's. We are prompted, kill Ellie.
This may be the most dissonant event in the entire game. I have not sampled every player on Earth, but I can tell you that no one wanted to kill Ellie, and especially not as Abby. This is dissonance that the game does well. The creators of this game want us to feel repulsed by this sequence, or at least that's what I think. The thought of having to kill Ellie, someone we love, especially with the same person that killed Joel, is a cacophony of dissonant sound. It is beyond overwhelming, it's unbearable. But the dissonance here works as intended. I'm supposed to hate this. I'm supposed to be angry that the game is forcing me into this position. And while I think Druckmann and his team intended it, I don't think they were aware of the lengths people will go to avoid that kind of cognitive dissonance. So why do so many people try so hard to avoid that type of cognitive dissonance? I think we can find one answer in Abigail Thorne's Philosophy Tube video, Who's Afraid of Gender? A Guide to Judith Butler, in which she discusses phantasms in the work of Michael Noss. In the video, Thorne says, "Phantasm is a technical philosophy term for a particular way of misinterpreting the world by projecting your feelings onto it. Professor Michael Noss says that it's a prism that refracts an as-if into an as-so. For example, the presence of a trans person with a penis in a public bathroom makes me feel as if I am under attack, becomes I am under attack." People use phantasms to avoid cognitive dissonance in the face of anxiety. Now, let's apply this to the game. Playing as Abby in this section, where I'm forced to attack Ellie, made me feel as if the game wanted to hurt me in some way. This is because of projective identity. I feel like Ellie, but it's also because I side with Ellie. I don't want to hurt Ellie as Abby, so it makes me feel as if the game wanted to hurt me in some way. I, however, can separate myself from the game, and I know that the game doesn't want to hurt me in a personal way, and that Abby isn't responsible for this feeling. But Druckmann and the creative team do want to manipulate my emotions to make me feel uncomfortable with what I'm doing. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Good storytelling does manipulate your emotions. However, we can see the problem for the people who do use the prism, who do project their feelings onto the world in order to read the world. If it made me feel as if the game wanted to hurt me, and I use the prism of the phantasm, the game does want to hurt me. It is attacking me. Now let's remember my earlier point about Ellie. Gamers identified with Joel consciously, but I believe that many players also, and perhaps subconsciously, identified with Ellie. They were at once Joel, the strong man, and Ellie, the child that needed a father figure. So now not only does it feel as if Abby is hurting Ellie, someone we love and identify with, and as if she killed our father figure, Joel, it also feels as if Abby is hurting you, the player, the child looking up to their father, and the hero finally being beaten. Through the prism, Abby is hurting us, hurting Ellie, and hurting Joel. What I'm saying is the theater scene works perfectly. It is perfectly dissonant, and it is that way on purpose. But the dissonance, combined with what I'm about to talk about, made it so that people felt personally attacked, and that Abby, the gender-bending, muscular, male-coded woman, was the one doing it to them. So let's talk about that. In Grounded 2, Neil Druckmann says, when talking about Abby, there's something really interesting in Abby feeling a lot like Joel. Earlier, he says, we need to separate Abby from Ellie. It shouldn't feel like we're playing a reskinned Ellie. Abby should, in many ways, look, behave, fight differently. Practically, I understand this a lot. Abby feels like Joel because playing two different characters that both handle exactly like Ellie would not have worked in a game like this, or at least it would have been more boring. However, I think this contributes to the dissonance around the game and Abby herself. Abby is masculine coded, plain and simple. This is not to say that women can't or don't look like Abby. The problem is that she is at once the one who killed Joel and the one who replaced him, and she did this while being a woman. While Druckmann says there is something interesting about playing a section of the game as not Joel, but as stand-in and murderer of Joel, he's actually referring to the dissonance. It feels wrong because she is a big, strong woman, and it feels wrong because she is what Joel would be in this game if she herself hadn't killed him in the beginning. Playing as Abby might make a player feel as if their gender is in question because you're supposed to identify with the strong, male-coded, playable character. The problem is Abby is a woman, a big, strong, male-coded woman, and not to mention, we were told to hate her the entire game so far. In Verily Bitchy's video, Video Games and the Sexy Gender Binary, they explain that, quote, the male gaze in cinema is a trinity. The male protagonist, the camera, and the audience all work together to make it clear the story is being told from a male perspective for a male audience, which often includes objectification of female characters. But video games take it 2 steps further. The player is not only the audience, you are also in charge of both the main character and the camera. You are the camera, so even if we radically do have a female player character now, that does nothing to disrupt the male gaze. The game is not suddenly for women just because the character is a woman. This is how games avoid players having to identify with female protagonists. This is why female characters have to be sexy. If she's sexy, she's not you, she's for you. Now, I'm not going to do a full breakdown of Western beauty standards here, that's another video, but Abby certainly falls outside of that archetype. She is not sexy and she's not supposed to be. And I agree with Verily Bitchy that makes certain players feel wrong because it forces them to confront, in a way that they may not be ready to or have the language to do, that they do not want to identify as a female character. They want the female character in their games to be for them. To realize that Abby is them feels as if their gender is being questioned. And if this hypothetical player also doesn't want to or can't even remotely acknowledge the idea that gender might be more fluid than binary, then that feeling also feels as if they are being attacked. And with that prism of the phantasm, they are. Their gender is being made fluid. And we can't have that, can we? As a side note, I don't really care that Abby is big and muscular. We are playing a game set in a world where people get infected with a fungus and become flesh-eating zombies. We are playing a game that is set in a world where in the first game, Joel fell off a ledge and got impaled and somehow made it to a cold, wet basement with little food and no medicine and somehow randomly woke up, soldiered on, and saved Ellie. Spare me with the, without PEDs, she wouldn't be able to... I don't care. She's big and she's strong. Who cares? Get over it. In fact, I want to make a counterpoint. The reason I think so many people hated Abby outright, aside from misogyny, obviously, is that they feel the same dissonance Druckmann talks about. Instead of thinking it is interesting, though, they thought it was bullshit. They hated it. We don't want to play as Abby. We want to play as Joel. We want our heroes back. Make The Last of Us great again. That feeling of emotional anguish, caused by cognitive and ludonarrative dissonance, causes people to lash out, and Abby was a super easy target because women in real life don't typically look like Abby. And here's where I want to make my second point. This fact was made more intense by the fact that one of the primary culture war battlefields right now is gender and gender expression. These people have already been taught to think that men should look like men and women should look like women, so Abby upsets that. Even though me and The Rock are both men, and yet I weigh 170 pounds and The Rock is the size of a mid-sized SUV, they have to have this made-up, well, men look a certain way and women look a certain way. Add to that point that she killed Joel, and you have a perfect recipe for a volatile reaction when they start to feel that pulling in 2 directions I've been talking about. So, this path we're about to walk down, the one that says there must be a woman at fault for this thing I don't like in my video games, for better or worse, it always leads back to her. Anita Sarkeesian is a feminist media critic who, unfortunately, became one of the main targets of the online harassment campaign known as Gamergate. This is because of her online video series called Tropes vs. Women in Video Games, where Sarkeesian does analysis of video games to see the ways feminist tropes and women characters show up in some of the most popular games of all time. In the business, we would call this analyzing media through a lens, and it is something that critics, professors, writers, editors, creators, English teachers, and even the normies do all the time. Anytime there is media to analyze, you're doing that analysis through some sort of lens. That lens might be something well established, like feminist theory, queer theory, Marxist theory, or something more specific, like the way you see something based on a personal experience as a human being in the world. The more well-established theories are useful because they have entire schools of thought built around them, which make them well thought out and the paths more clearly set in place.
But because of that culture war stuff I was talking about before, people are primed to dislike anything with the word feminist attached to it, even if they don't know how it works. Pillar of Garbage has a really great video about woke spotting that I think applies well here. Some of these players see the word feminism, and they immediately know they aren't supposed to like that thing because feminism equals woke. They call it bad because that's what they're supposed to do. Woke equals bad, feminism equals woke, therefore feminism equals bad. If you were around at the time The Last of Us 2 came out, you will remember this reaction online. But I went looking for some stuff to help make this point, and I found a Reddit thread that captures this idea perfectly. In the post, asks, does the game actually explain why Abby is so buff? Not planning on playing it, but watching videos on YouTube. She is bigger than like almost all the male characters. What the hell is going on with her character design? Just very curious. Scroll down and you'll see some answers. Mr. says, she is how a strong female looks in Cuckman's eyes. This is a common refrain. Neil Druckmann is a feminist, and so this is what a strong female is. But then we see it says, quote, the answer is ... Anita Sarkeesian. Replies and says, this is so true. When you hire an uber feminist who lies about liking video games to advise on characters, of course she's going to recommend the character is stronger than any male character in the game. Just go watch Feminist Frequency, Tropes versus Women in Video Games on YouTube to see what I mean. Gamergate, despite taking place in 2015, still survives online in the larger alt-right online and real-life spaces we see everywhere. Gamergate is directly tied to our current terrifying political situation. There are lots of books and articles and videos which cover Gamergate. I'll link a few of them in the description if you want to learn more, but I'm not going over the whole history here. These Redditors, which, by the way, some of them didn't even play the game, they just got on the internet to complain about a buff woman, so that's an interesting choice, but these players feel dissonance at the idea of a woman being that big and strong. And instead of blaming Druckmann completely, they still find a way to blame a woman. Says, Sarkeesian worked on the game, so I did some Googling. Turns out, shockingly, she didn't work on the game. So not only are they finding a way to blame a woman, they are trying to blame a woman that did not personally work on The Last of Us Part 2 at all. The only connection from Sarkeesian to The Last of Us 2 is that Neil Druckmann likes and was apparently influenced by her critical work. So that obviously somehow becomes her advising on characters and therefore ruining The Last of Us. Perhaps on purpose, if some of these Redditors are to be believed. Not Hallie Gross, mind you, the one who actually co-wrote the game. No, Anita Sarkeesian, who literally had nothing to do with this game. But here's the deal. I would be a liar if I said that Sarkeesian and the ideas she talks about, namely reading video games through feminist and queer theory lenses, didn't make their way into the game. They did. Neil Druckmann and the creative team definitely cared deeply about making gender, sexuality, and queerness a part of their video game. This is of course true in The Last of Us Part 1 as well, because Ellie has always been queer. So let's talk about queer theory. So I'm not doing a full background on queer theory. Genuinely, I don't think that would be very helpful. Instead, to help me, I'm going to use the entry for queer theory in NYU's Keywords for Gender and Sexuality Studies book to help think about things more clearly. This entry, written by Anna Marie Jagos, or Yagos, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, states that Teresa de Lauritis has been credited with coining the phrase queer theory. Jagos goes on to say that Lauritis, quote, means it to indicate at least three interrelated critical projects: a refusal of heterosexuality as the benchmark for all sexual formations, an attentiveness to gender capable of interrogating the frequent assumption that lesbian and gay studies is a single, homogeneous object, and an instance on the multiple ways in which race crucially shapes sexual subjectivities. While these are the, quote, critical projects that the term takes on, it is also true that, quote, queer theory's refusal to specify itself has been widely recognized as one of its tactical strengths. Since queer's opposition to the normative is its one consistent characteristic, it has the potential to invent itself endlessly, reformulating whatever knowledges currently constitute prescribed understandings of sexuality. So truly, what does any of that mean?
Basically, what this says, in a really, really oversimplified way, is that queer theory is used to disrupt normativity. Heteronormativity for sure, but what is thought of as normal more generally. In the broadest sense, queerness is a lens we can use to look at anything which disrupts the normal way of seeing things. And that really stems from the old school use of the word queer. When something was queer, it was non-normative. It was against the status quo. With this definition in mind, we could argue that the entirety of Abby's section of this game is influenced by queer theory. Abby herself, while heterosexual, is queer-coded if we're using this previous understanding of the term. She's extremely muscular to the point that she can overpower male characters, and this is non-normative. A good example is the difference in the stealth killing animation for Ellie and Abby. When Ellie stealth kills a person or a zombie, she stabs it with her pocket knife. Abby uses brute strength. She strangles her enemies. This is because Abby can physically do this, whereas Ellie cannot. Ellie is not strong enough to do this. But to be more general, the very fact that we play as Abby at all, something that wasn't marketed, something that we do not want to do because she is Joel's killer and the game has reinforced the idea that she is the ultimate villain, that might be said to be inherently queer. She isn't who we signed up to play as. She handles much differently than Ellie, and worst of all, she killed Joel, the hero of the first game. Playing her is non-normative. This is also dissonant to players. It is a dissonant experience to play as Abby here because she is the polar opposite of Joel. She is the one who killed him, but she feels like Joel gameplay-wise, and that is odd. But queer theory is also used to analyze characters themselves. Abby, though queer-coded, is heterosexual. So instead, let's remember that Ellie is a lesbian who has a loving relationship with Dina for a while. Not only Ellie, but Lev falls into this category too. Lev is trans, and he is also arguably one of the best characters introduced in this game. He is meant to mirror Ellie in Abby's story the way Abby mirrors Joel. In fact, it is the dissonance of Lev's trans experience that leads him and his sister Yara to run away from the Seraphites.
Did you hear what they called me?
Yeah.
Do you want to ask me about it?
Do you want me to ask you about it?
No.
Okay.
Lev feels like a boy, wants to live his life as a boy, but was born biologically female. The Seraphites enforce strict gender roles, which would obviously create an extremely dissonant experience for Lev, one that is so overwhelming for him that he must leave. And yet Lev goes back to try to convince his mother to see that he is still the same person she raised, something that results in Lev being forced to kill her. The creators of this game make Lev's trans identity and the dissonance he feels because of it one of the central storylines of the game. It is this unfortunately all too common queer experience, being rejected by one's parents because you are gay or trans or some other non-heterosexual or heteronormative identity, that drives Lev back to his mother, forcing Abby to give chase. And this also makes it clear that Druckmann, Gross, and the creative team were really interested in telling trans and queer stories. The problem is that woke spotting is built around noticing when something is non-normative and then calling it woke to win online culture war points. This storyline is super queer. It's queer because we play as Abby. It's queer because this section is going against the traditional ways stories are told in games. And it's queer because it centers around a trans person's familial struggle. It's a real shame that so many people weren't able to really appreciate how good this storyline is, because not only does it center the experience of a marginalized person like Lev, it also shows how people like Lev are often treated in our real world for simply being themselves. And yet this is super important to show in games precisely because of the response so many had to this game when it was announced. If you don't remember, I'll illustrate it for you. In 2018, Naughty Dog revealed The Last of Us Part 2 at E3, using one of the best scenes in the entire game. The party scene, where Dina and Ellie kiss and the bigoted man comes up to accost them for it. Joel, seeing this, attempts to defend Ellie, who is, after all, essentially his daughter. After this, we can see that Ellie is clearly upset with Joel for something. We just don't know what yet. The scene is a standout for what video game storytelling can do. It showcases all the characters we know and sets us up for the story that fans of the first game have been anticipating for years. Except the response to this reveal online was very ugly. During the live stream of E3, which I was watching because it had been rumored that they were going to announce The Last of Us Part 2, the live chat on YouTube became angry and violent when Dina and Ellie kissed. There it is, the comments said. The LGBTQ agenda. Why do they have to make everyone gay? Of course they have to push that into this game. They have to push this down our throats. I'm sure the name Anita Sarkeesian was thrown around a lot. All the while, the man that these boys idolized, Joel, was coming to Ellie's aid to protect her from a homophobic assault. There's something about irony here, isn't there? There's something about dissonance, too. These boys were tearing apart Ellie for being gay without realizing that their father figure, Joel, would respond to them the same way he responded to Ellie's would-be attacker.
The fuck did you just say?
Ellie, Ellie, don't.
Get the hell out of here.
Get your hands off me.
Hey! Enough.
But unfortunately, the queer experience is something that produced dissonance in a lot of the players that played The Last of Us 2 because, like I said earlier, trans equals woke, woke equals bad, trans equals bad. This reveal, playing as Abby, and the centralizing of queer experiences made some gamers feel as if gender politics were destroying good games, and therefore, through the prism, gender politics were destroying good games. So that's it. We did it. We did it. We're done. We're done, right? Wait, why is there so much left? Did I forget somebody? In Matilda, Matilda's father, Harry Wormwood, who is played by Danny DeVito, sells used cars. But he doesn't just sell used cars, he cheats his customers by making the cars seem better than they are. He quiets the transmission on one car with sawdust. He superglues a bumper on another. He rolls the mileage back to sell them at a higher price. When Matilda confronts her father about this, he tells her in so many words that he doesn't care. He knows he's scamming his customers and selling them fraudulent goods. He knows that he's selling them something different than what they expect. Now, I want to be clear here. I don't think Neil Druckmann cheated his customers. If anything, he actually gave them 2 for the price of 1. But he did, even if it was sort of a by omission, lie. The marketing of the game deliberately left out, and if I remember correctly, made sure that reviewers could not talk about almost half of the game. This, to me, is where a lot of those dissonance problems connect with the culture war we see happening every day on the internet. Druckmann kept secret something that many fans disliked, and so to them, it felt nefarious. Like he was intentionally trying to hurt them and ruin what they thought was going to be a sequel to one of their favorite games. And there is the as-if prism again. Because of this, I think a lot of the culture war grifters were able to sink their teeth into the game without any context of what was happening. In Grounded 2, Neil Druckmann says, "I view marketing as part of the game. It's very calculated what we put out there and how we want to connect different marketing assets." This shows that Druckmann, and by extension Naughty Dog, were very deliberate in how they sold their game and what they showed the audience before its launch. Druckmann goes on to say, "We actually underestimated our audience a little bit. They're so sophisticated now, so you have to get more sophisticated, like, how am I going to surprise players and viewers? At no point are we going to market that you play as this other character." I gotta be honest here, I think this is a terrible decision. I think this is extremely deceptive. The first time I played this game, when we switched to Kid Abby to see some backstory about her father, I remembered thinking, okay, this is fine. We're humanizing her a bit. But when the Day 1 Seattle title hit, I remember feeling tricked and annoyed. What do you mean I have to play this all over again as Abby? I don't want to do that. This game is supposed to be about Ellie and her revenge quest. That's what you promised me. It's not supposed to be about Joel's killer. I don't care about Joel's killer. In fact, I hate her. And I've been being rewarded for hating her this entire time. I want to kill her because the game wants me to kill her. I feel as if the game tricked me, but this time, the game, Naughty Dog, Druckmann, kind of actually did trick me. The second time I played the game, knowing Abby was coming, I felt very differently. I was interested in seeing her story again without the anger and dissonance from being tricked into playing as her. Even that first playthrough, I remember feeling very differently about Abby by the time I got to the end. I didn't want Abby to die, but mostly because of Lev. I recognized Lev's parallel to Ellie and wanted him to survive. We saw what happened when Joel was almost taken out of the picture in the first game. Ellie barely survived, and probably wouldn't have for much longer without her protector, Joel. Abby, Lev's protector, must survive in order for Lev to make it, especially in that final confrontation where he is all but dead already laying on that boat. But on the second playthrough, I knew that Abby would be a central part of the experience. I knew that I wanted to be more open to Abby's life and her redemption, and with that knowledge, I enjoyed the game much, much more. 10 to 12 hours worth of story and gameplay was kept secret from players, and by extension, the final section in Santa Barbara also had to be omitted because it would be impossible to talk about without talking about Abby. Meaning that not only did they leave out the second playable character, but they also didn't tell players about the final section, which is easily a few hours as well. The game was completely marketed and sold using gameplay and story beats from the first half. It was marketed as a revenge story about hate, which featured Ellie. We were not promised a redemption, and if the player wanted to see anyone get that redemption, we wanted that person to be Ellie. In this way, I think it's fair to say that Naughty Dog was selling something that was different from what they marketed. This, I think, inherently creates a dissonant experience. We're pulled in two directions. We hear the clashing notes, and that's all because we were promised one thing and received another. Some good examples here are the ads that featured Abby and the one that featured Joel going on the journey with Ellie. Those were both used to intentionally misdirect the audience into thinking something about the game that wasn't true. The ad with Joel is completely fake. Joel is dead by the time we get to that section of the game they were advertising. On the flip side, I remember the response around the time of the Abby ad, which shows the scene where the Seraphites are about to hang her and Yara and Lev save her. At the time, everyone was saying that she was Ellie's mother. I went to GameSpot's repost of the Abby trailer, and one comment stood out to me. Someone said, "Remember when we felt sympathy for this woman before she killed Joel?" And here, I think we have to talk about the leak. The Last of Us Part 2 came out during 2020, in the middle of the global COVID pandemic, and when the pandemic started, Naughty Dog decided to push the release of the game back. During that time, a hacker stole the game and leaked it, and this gave so much room for the grifters. All those reactionary right-wing YouTubers got all this out-of-context footage, which showed not only a strong male-coded woman, but that she was the one who killed our beloved flannel-wearing hero. Right-wing grifters thrive off of a lack of context because it makes it easier for them to lie about whatever they want. For this video, I actually tried to engage with one of their reviews and realized at about the 6-minute mark that not only was he being misogynistic and transphobic, he was also lying about certain story beats in the game. Not because he made a mistake, but because those lies make it easier to sell his narrative about the game being anti-male and, of course, woke. I knew he was going to be selling his particular right-wing coded ideology, but I wasn't expecting outright lies. I'm not sure why I was expecting someone like him to tell the truth, but still, it's this reaction to the game that, for me, connects so significantly to the culture war. I keep using this term culture war, but really, to draw my 2 points together, it is a culture in dissonance. Trans people make up about 0.6% of the population in America, and yet transness has become one of the most talked about subjects in our politics. This is on purpose. The LGBTQ agenda is something that the current president of the United States has been talking about for around a decade now. During his campaign, Trump said something about sex change operations being done on, quote, illegal aliens. In the State of the Union, he said something like, Democrats spend $8 million on transgender mice, when in reality they were transgenic mice, which are, if you didn't know, not the same fucking thing. His most rabid fans believe that's actually happening, and the ones profiting most off of his grift know that it doesn't matter if it's actually happening. As long as he can get behind the podium and say that trans people are coming for your genitals, they can keep profiting off of the fear that that creates. The game's leak allows the grifters the ability to make up the narrative they wanted, but this was only made worse because Druckmann decided not to tell his audience about half of the game he was selling. It's really the perfect storm. A lack of actual narrative combined with woke spotting, which requires a deliberate denial or ignoring of context. I've shit on conservatives quite a bit here, so now let me switch it up. I don't know Neil Druckmann. Everything I've seen of him and every opinion I formed of him is completely parasocial. And now with that, I'm going to give you my take on him. Druckmann strikes me as a very naive liberal. Let's go back to there's something interesting about Abby feeling a lot like Joel line. I agree with Druckmann here. But I think that's because I probably agree with Druckmann ideologically in a lot of ways. Believe me, there are plenty of things I probably do not agree with Druckmann on, but when it comes to your run-of-the-mill liberal politics, we probably would agree on a lot. In I Finally Understand Edgelords by F.D. Signifier, he talks about how right-wingers often misinterpret and misunderstand media. The right has a lot of trouble really taking away the point from any given movie or TV show, and that's why most of their favorite shows or movies are actually critiques of capitalism and power, and yet they still love Elon Musk. In this video, he is specifically talking about Joker 2, and the fact that Todd Phillips seemed to be speaking directly to the core fan base of the first film, who did not understand that we really weren't supposed to be rooting for Arthur Fleck. From my reading, we're supposed to understand that all the systems in place to help a person like him failed, and that is the ultimate antagonist, so to speak, of the movie. But towards the end of the video, FD Signifier says this: I found myself stuck in a way that I'm not used to when I write a video. Something about being correct here in my original criticisms of this media didn't feel like it should. Yes, I was right, or at the minimum, the way I was looking at these things seemed to be indicative of the way some of these creators were starting to look at these things too. But that feels meaningless now that I'm thinking harder about what is actually happening here. Yeah, it's nice to dunk on right-wingers who don't understand media and are so bad at it, in fact, that the creators themselves had to spell it out blatantly so that even an idiot could see it. And yes, this doesn't change their mind, but it's at least fun to read their angry tweets. But then something else hit me that almost made me kill this whole video. He then goes on to talk about Drive and Nightcrawler, 2 more videos in the edgelord white guy genre, and concludes that the thing is, while people with views similar to mine may be less critical about the way Nightcrawler engages with this archetype, it doesn't matter either way to these right-wing edgelord type people in question. It won't stop them from ignoring the messages of Nightcrawler or ignoring subtext in Drive. It won't change their mind. It won't stop them from being assholes online. It won't stop them from recruiting and getting people to fall deeper into reactionary online spaces. From the angle that I present up until this point, Nightcrawler does things the right way. But what difference does that actually make? While I'm not making the same point as FD here, can I call him FD? Mr. Signifier? I don't know. He's talking about the flip side of the phenomenon I think I'm getting at. I think like many kind of elite-adjacent, well-educated middle to upper-class liberals, Neil Druckmann doesn't realize that the idea of Abby's physical presence in the game being interesting to him is extremely upsetting to right-wingers. And unfortunately, those right-wing players also tend to be the loudest on the internet. The dissonance that I've been talking about works for people who love to do media analysis, people who love to deconstruct pieces of media to try to see what the points are, what's interesting, what are the messages, what's the context, and so on. I felt angry that I had to fight Ellie as Abby at the end of that section of the game, but I also understood that was probably the point. Or at least, if it wasn't the point, it is true that a good story should evoke emotions in a way that I might enjoy or not enjoy. Sometimes you love the way the movie ends because the good guys figure out how to defeat the bad guy or overcome the problem. And sometimes Thanos wins. That's literally what happens at the end of The Last of Us 2. Ellie loses everything. When she returns back to her farmhouse, Dina and the baby and all of her things are gone. Ellie's stuff is all that's left. Ellie picks up her guitar to play the song that Joel taught her, and she can't because she's lost her fingers in the fight with Abby. This is not a happy ending. The point here? That's the price you pay for revenge. You can't go on a rampage through the world and get away with it. And before you say, Abby did the same thing, the game gives us no reason to believe that. Actually, from what we can see, Abby only kills one person, Joel. She leaves both Ellie and Tommy alive. I hated this ending. I hated seeing Ellie lose everything. But I also understand the point of this story is to show what can happen when you recklessly pursue revenge. It hurts me to see Ellie like this, but I also understand I'm supposed to feel like that. I'm supposed to feel hurt. This isn't a personal attack. This is the dissonance that Naughty Dog and Druckmann want us to feel. It's dissonant on purpose. And that's exactly why people who avoid cognitive dissonance at all costs hated it so much. So what's my point? My point is, it's really important to be critical of media and to be critical of stories. But how we are critical is equally, if not more important. it's important that we're critical lovers of the texts that we love, which means we can point out things that we love about The Last of Us. I love Abby's story. I love the idea of undoing something that gamers liked, making Ellie a villain. I love the idea of centering gender and queerness in a AAA video game. But there are things I don't like. And that nuance often gets lost by certain people trying to do critique in a very nefarious way. So when we are being critical of media, we must be aware of two things. First, we have to be very aware that we don't critique something that we dislike subjectively as if it is objectively bad. What I mean by that is you can dislike the idea of gender as a theme in a story, but you can't be mad. You can't say gender as a theme in a story is bad. That's not true. The theme of gender can be read into any story if you want to do that. That's the point of themes, and that's the point of criticism, is looking at it and going, I want to read this through a critical race lens, through a feminist lens, through a queer theory lens, through a Marxist lens. That's the point of criticism. And here's my second point. So when there are certain people telling you, Abby is bad because she's strong, or Abby is a bad character because she's not realistic, what they're saying is, I don't like Abby in this game because she makes me think about gender. That's how I hear it. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with being like, well, I don't want to think about gender. I mean, I think you should, but there's nothing inherently wrong with being like, I don't really like the idea of gender as a theme in my game. But that doesn't mean it's not in there. And it also doesn't mean that it's bad, right? Like, you can dislike something. That's fine. But a lot of times, a lot of these right-wing critiquers on YouTube are really just hitting all the buzzwords. Gender is a lightning rod in our culture right now, and they know that if they just say it enough, really elaborately, they end up saying Abby is bad because she doesn't fit into standards. That's not critique. That's not critique. That's just using cultural forces to make money, because you know that a lot of people will eat that up. That's not only is it lazy, it's bad. It's bad for society. It makes people think that you're doing criticism when in reality you're just saying what the oppressors want you to say. And what sucks is that so many people think that those people are the ones that are anti-oppression, that they are fighting the good fight, when in reality they're not. They are doing what oppressors want them to do. In fact, I want to add, you can't ever be objective as a human being. You're a subject, and therefore you are subjective. That's not a bad thing. Your subjectivity is not a bad thing. You can work really hard and get close to being objective, but to be truly objective would mean to be unhuman. So I don't buy it. Your biases are always going to bleed in. My biases are always going to bleed in to my critique, but also to the way I read everything. Also, critique requires, or really good criticism requires that you understand the way criticism works and what it is you're trying to say. I am not a gender scholar, but I'm a PhD student, I'm a college teacher, and I've taken multiple gender studies classes. I would never call myself an expert on gender studies. I've read the texts. I would never call myself an expert on that. But I understand the way real serious people who are experts on gender are talking about it, and therefore I can use that knowledge to understand and then give a valid criticism. Somebody who says, no woman actually looks like this. Have you seen a women's rugby team? All in all, The Last of Us Part 2 is really great. And I hate to say this, but Abby's section is actually really great. The redemption story that Abby gets to have, I wish Ellie got to have, but to say that the game is bad because it made you play do something that was uncomfortable, that's not good, man. Just you should try your best to understand what is happening, even if you don't like it. There are some stories that is the point. You're not supposed to like what's happening, but you get through the story anyway. And I want to applaud The Last of Us 2 for like trying to do something like that in a medium that is so immersive. It really makes you feel like you're doing something you don't want to do. The truth of it is, The Last of Us Part 2 did something that a lot of games don't do, and it's cool. We should want our games to do this, and we shouldn't allow the right wing to dictate how games work. I feel like I'm drawing on here. So, I'm going to say this. Thank you for watching if you came this far. I appreciate you. I'm going to say all the stuff. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Send it to your friend. Watch it 400 times. I am the Video Game Professor. Have a good one.